Hey guys, it's Darius with Off-Road Universe. Wanted to do a quick video. So I got the WR500 out and have the IT490 out. Want to do a quick comparison as far as I can tell on some of the differences of these bikes. Now, they do share a common lineage, and that is the motor, which is the, probably just the cases, right? The cylinders are slightly different. The heads are different. There's a different bolt configuration, but still, it's kind of a neat comparison. I'll tell y'all why. So first of all, the IT490 is part of that first generation of 490cc motor that they developed going back to 83, which is the year that they punched out, actually 82, which is the year they punched out the 465. And so this motor, originally found itself in the YZ490. And then, of course, in 83, they took the 490 size cylinder, made some porting changes, which I have documented on some of the Facebook groups, and put it in an off-road chassis, and we got the IT490. So, it's super cool. Now, one thing to note about this is I believe the number of head bolts and also the side port design, and that is because you've got a center tube coming down. So they had to figure out a way to still have the exhaust port, direct the exhaust out, but they couldn't have it in the center. And I think there was some, things about that were somewhat limiting on power, although I don't really hear that the 82, 83 YZ490s were down on power, but who knows? One day I'd love to compare them all. So the other thing is that in 1984, they went to the center port. And so I'm just going to share here the WR500. You can see here it has the center port, which a lot of you YZ guys will know that was, pretty much what they started doing from 1984 onward was that center port. I also think they added, a bolt because I had some gaskets, copper gaskets, and I don't think that they worked on the on the IT. I can't remember what number. I think they added one just for more sealing pressure. I do believe, however, that the case, the clutch cover case, I think does fit on both bikes. And I could be wrong about that, but I think the center cases are the same and they're just different colors. So that's kind of cool. We've also documented some of the slight changes to the kickstart shaft. Now on this bike, I've got a machined shaft, whereas, in 83, 84, it was pressed on. And so other than that, they're pretty much very different bikes. I mean, this bike shares the Yamaha chassis from the YZ250 of its day. And that was pretty much the big deal about the WR500 was literally a 500 motor shoehorned into a YZ250 chassis. And you can even take the YZ250 tanks from that time and fit them on this frame. The only thing they did, of course, was gusset, the frame. And also, I think the swing arm is unique. A lot of guys will take the YZ250 swing arm and put it on this bike. I guess because they don't like the snail adjusters that are here. So yeah, in comparing them, it's kind of cool, and the reason I think it's cool is because this is, first and foremost, obviously an off-road bike. That's what the IT, just mix some hours here. That's what the IT490 was all about, and it's a pretty special bike, right? And then, this bike was no longer produced after 1984, and then they just purely had the YZ490. And the YZ490s, continued on until about 89 to 1990. I think 90 was the last. And then they retired it, but then they brought out what was kind of like another off-road bike, the WR series, kind of replaced the IT series. And the WR is kind of like an off-road kind of motocross combination, kind of like the KTM MXCs used to be. And so they took this basic motor and brought it back and stuffed it in the chassis. So, pretty cool. These are kind of like the tail ends of Yamaha's off-road open class experiments. And you've got, the first, iteration of the 490 in an off-road chassis, and you've got kind of the last iteration. And so 83, 84 versus 1992. And you can see the differences in the chassis. Definitely the WR benefited from a lot of the motocross technology, a lot of the slimmer feel, including the disc brakes. front and rear, the upside down forks, and things of that sort. Still, they couldn't get away from the tall highboy pipe because of the massive cylinder size. But still, I think it's super, super cool. They did redesign the shape of the kickstart lever. And so you can see here, this is pretty much just a straight lever. But still seems to work pretty well. A little bit high. Everyone complains they're high mounted. But yeah, very cool bikes. 18-inch rear wheels. Just some really, really cool things about them. Now, the other thing I'm going to say that I think is cool about the WR is that the way this feels, it feels very much chassis-wise like this bike, which is pretty much your modern, fairly modern YZ250X. And this bike right here is a 2018. They've since changed the, the tank configuration and all that, and they've done different body paneling. But these bikes feel very similar in terms of the seating, the width of the tank, all of that. So it's a testament to Yamaha. All the way back in '92, they had everything pretty much figured out. And, they kept that sort of slim styling. But it's just cool to see both of them, and I'd like to get both of them out and compare them. The motors are very similar, and they share a heritage. I would say they're definitely cousins, and I wouldn't be surprised if the center cases and the cases themselves and the mounting points are probably very similar, if not the same. Now, you couldn't mount the IT490 motor on the WR500 because of, the side port would basically hit right there. And you can see they flipped the pipe around, but they also did that with the YZ. So that probably came around 84 or so. I am very curious about the performance, so I want to go through that a little bit. What I know, I'm going to just shoot off the top of my head. So, porting-wise, we've got some changes, right? The WR, the IT490 has less square exhaust port than the YZ. It's actually much more rounded. It's rounded, so you've got less surface area, smaller port, basically brings the power output down a little bit or significantly, pretty decent amount. And some people say the ports are lower, so the power comes on a lot sooner, which is what you would want for off-road. It's very smooth. It's very tractable. A lot of people say that it's just literally the dirt bike said it was a magic power band. It was magic. Like, it was just perfect, And if you wanted a little more power, you slip an Answer silencer, which was the one at the time. These days, it'd be whatever's available, DG, whatever. But the main thing was that the stock exhaust was very restrictive. So a lot of guys took the DG pipe or one, exhaust, and that was good for another 4 horsepower. So pretty cool stuff. What do we also know? Well, we know that the WR, from my understanding, has the YZ porting. So unless I'm wrong, this is going to have a much wider exhaust port. So it's going to have the power output similar to a YZ. But they wanted to take a little bit of that hit off. So what they did, they retarded the timing. So it's got a little more retarded timing, probably 1.7 before top dead center. Probably a lot like the IT. And you also had the pinging and kickback issue, but they also reduced the compression. So this bike right here has less compression than this bike in its stock configuration. And it's got the same porting though as a YZ, whereas this has softer porting. So it'd be very interesting to see, how they change things around, what differences there are. They, of course, fabricated a very special pipe for this bike. Yamaha did to bring the power down a little lower, smooth some of the power out. So I'd be very curious to compare them and see kind of how they play out. Carburetor, I think is the same. I think it's the same 38 millimeter. I think it's a Mikuni SS or something like that. So that's kind of cool. But be very interesting to compare them and just see kind of how they both stack up and how they feel. Two very cool bikes. I think there's a few other changes. I can't really remember. Timing, compression, porting is going to be a little different. Pipe, of course, can be a little different. But yeah, that's about it. I think they're probably going to be fairly similar. But of course, we'll have to get there and try it out. And it's a pretty cool thing. I've got another little bike here y'all are probably familiar with. I only brought her out because I think it's kind of fun. She's got that Yamaha yellow. She's definitely a lot smaller. She's only a 50cc, but she's a lot of fun too. Definitely a fun bike for putting around the neighborhood. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed it. If you want to watch more of this content, or you want to see maybe the WR 500 and the IT 490 out there, I'd like to do some back-to-back kind of comparisons over the course of a couple weeks and just give you my seat of the pants impressions. I think that'll be pretty fun. Sorry for the long video. Hope you liked it. They're both pretty awesome bikes, and I'm grateful to have them in the stable and be able to share this piece of motocross history and also enjoy riding this piece of living motocross history that now I have with the IT 490. And will I get a YZ 490? I don't know. I don't know. You know, if one came about, maybe. I was looking actually for one before I got the IT, but you know, I kind of feel like the YZ was a great bike for its time, but it kind of stayed too long at the fair, and they didn't make enough changes. So, you know, in '89, for example, they didn't even test the bike. Some of the magazines, I think there was one Australian magazine, they were like, we're not even going to test it because it hasn't changed and it's not really up to, you know, the caliber of the other bikes at the time, the KX 500, the CR 500, KTM 500. So not putting it down, I just feel like if it was an early year, you know, that would be kind of cool because it was like the state of the art at the time. But I think as the years went on, you know, it was still a very cool bike, but just not as attractive anymore for like anyone who was, you know, looking to race. Although, you know, it did well. Brock Glover, I think, won in '85 on it and so forth. But it became a little more of an off-road bike, you know. So anyway, we'll see. But just wanted to compare and show you guys what they're like. We'll see you soon. If you like this content, hit like and subscribe.